you're on this podcast, obviously sales and marketing, it's like they're the same, but they're very different. Like there's all sorts of stuff. Sales, you can really, hey, I get on the phone with you, I have a cold call, I can make that sale. I know how much that means. I get a return on investment. At the same time, you get on a podcast, it doesn't work that way, right? It's a little bit different. It's like that story we said, like maybe that story does sell. I don't know, but like you're spending time, you talked about having your own podcast, you've been on other podcasts, you're on this podcast, like that's a tough one to measure an ROI on. I look on both sides of it to say, there is the known benefit and then there's the unknown benefit. And that unknown benefit could be a ridiculous return on investment, right? Someone could call us up tomorrow and say, hey, we want to buy your podcast show for millions of dollars, right? That's immeasurable as to what that would be in the thousands of percent. Anyway, like you spending time podcasting, why?
I joke around always. People are like, why are you doing a podcast, JR? And I'm like, well, in 2022, having a podcast is like having a business card in 1992. Like you almost need it. But I find it as a really good way that we get to control the narrative of like who we are as a brand and as an organization. So that's like number one for me is like, it's a chance for us to tell our story in our way, right? Versus normal old school ways. The other thing is, and you just hit the nail on the head, is if one athlete listens to this, and it doesn't even matter if they come to our company, but they're like, well, what he just said about sales being about the skills, the habits, and the process, that sounds interesting to me. I actually might give that a shot. Like you never know when you're telling stories and you're talking about your background, you're talking about the mission, you're talking about your future plans. You don't know who that's going to resonate with and who that's going to impact. And podcasting is this unbelievable platform where you can get out there and you have no idea who's listening to it and how it's going to impact them. I've been sober for 10 years and I talk about that a lot on my podcast that I go on. I can't tell you how many text messages I've gotten, Eric, from people I have no idea who they are, who heard me talk about it and said, hey, JR, thank you for talking about your sobriety. You know, it helped me finally realize that I had a problem and start making some changes, right? So like things like that make it all worth it, regardless of the hard dollar ROI that I can measure on a spreadsheet.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because we talk with your team, you come on this podcast and I could read about you. I could learn about you. And trust me, I love reading and writing. There's something though in a conversation that you just can't replace it, especially one-on-one. And if it's the next best thing is listening to someone else have that conversation for you. Maybe they don't ask all the other right stuff. And that's when you start your own and be like, hey, JR, come on my podcast. I have some questions for you. Because like, man, you could take that down so many different places just with what you just opened up right there with and talking about sobriety and what that meant. There's a lot in that. And yeah, that's spot on. And not to go down different paths, but when you talk about that, was there this time between, and I don't know, and I don't know if I'm guessing what I'm doing, but in between like of you playing hockey and not playing hockey and then starting your career, was there this gap for you that there was a different scene or different things that you were involved in that you didn't have something that you were passionate about? Because you're very passionate. Like to say that you're weird, that you like cold calling, like that's weird, right? It's like not a normal thing, right?
Yeah.
And it's an aggressive behavior. And I don't know if that's the right word for it, but it's like, you got to have some guts to go and do that. Like, were you missing that piece? I don't know. I got just throwing that out there.
Well, so there wasn't a gap. I stopped playing and then I started working as a technology sales professional. But what I didn't bring over was like, I kind of call it professionalism, right? Like, I kind of was like, I was doing a job. It wasn't a career for me initially. Probably for like the first 4 or 5 years that I did it, I was kind of like going through the motion, showing up to work, doing the bare minimum. And I wasn't having a ton of success. And I was drinking a lot and I was using drugs and I was in a bad place. And then I kind of had this like epiphany moment where I was like, stop feeling sorry for myself about the fact that I wasn't a professional hockey player and realize that that doesn't mean I can't be a professional. And it's like, the reason that professional athletes make a lot of money is because they make a lot of sacrifices and they make a big commitment. And there's certain careers out there that if you make the same type of commitment that Tom Brady made to football, you can become the best third grade teacher in the world. And that's something that's super rewarding emotionally and personally. So that's kind of the epiphany moment that I had when I stopped drinking, stopped using drugs, and started to be a professional in this industry. And that was kind of the changing moment in my life. And what I try to do is get kids to not go through that dark night of the soul period that I had, in my mid 20s, where I was like lost. I was doing a job, I didn't have a career, and I had lost focus in general. So that's kind of what saved me, I think, was this career.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, man, when I create content in these podcasts, oftentimes I think about, would my kids listen at some point and would they get something from it? And like, I can honestly say, like, I would want, for example, my son, who's my oldest, I'd want him to listen to this without a doubt, like whatever he's thinking about, because like he loves sports. He loves playing sports. He's a soccer goalkeeper. And what does that mean? And where are you going to go with it? And if it doesn't work out, and I talked to this other person who went through these struggles, like his own struggles. And I was like, did you need to go through those struggles to get to here? And I was like, most people, yes, absolutely. Like, and that's true. And he's like, no, because I was surrounded by all this. I knew all the people that went through that. If I would have just listened to them, then I didn't have to go through this.
Right.
So he's like, no, I didn't want to need to go through it. But, it works both ways. I get it. But it's like, man, here you are creating this content, sharing the story. And like my kid, if that's it, and he's the only one that ever heard it, man, that's why I do this.
Totally.
And here's the thing. If another entrepreneur, business owner, founder, whatever person reaches out and says, man, can you help me create a podcast and do that? Absolutely. I love doing that. I love helping people tell that story because I know I've witnessed it for ourselves and for them to say, what does that do for them? And someone can come here, well, show me on the spreadsheet and the ROI. Man, I've had forensic engineer come on here and say, you cannot spreadsheet this shit. And I was like, dude, that is Mr. Spreadsheet. Like his computer's in his office, but it's the unlimited potential that also exists within it all.
Content Matterz with a Z is our content marketing company that helps entrepreneurs tell their own stories to those who care. And here's the thing. We think every entrepreneur that is willing should have their own content platform. And we want to help make that happen, both by working directly with entrepreneurs and by sharing our own stories, exploring the craft of content marketing. Content Matterz, one piece of content at a time. Learn more at kazcontent.com.